So in this property, we have an interesting case of brown mould. Brown mould, unlike black mould, will grow at lower levels of relative humidity, but it does need a very long time on very consistent relative humidity. It tends to be for properties that have been left vacant for long periods of time, when people close up at the weekend and don't leave dehumidifiers or heating. Now, listen to the survey. I will say that I was brought in to look at for rising damp, and clearly you won't have rising damp if there's mould. Have a listen and I'll talk at the end. Profile of damp from a picture being up against the wall. And that's because the vapour gets in behind the picture, but you don't get the heat, so you get high surface relative humidity. But because it's brown mould, we know that it's between 80 and 85% is the standard. There you go, down there as well. Oh, that's behind the sofa.
Clean that off.
Yeah, so the way I would deal with it is I would try and take as much surface mould off by using it, when it's dry, using sanding paper just to reduce it. Maybe have a vacuum cleaner at hand to make sure you're not getting lots of airborne dust. Then spray it with HG. In this case, because there isn't actually a huge amount of it, you could just spray the HG straight on, and you'll find it's amazing. It will almost disappear within about half an hour, so you can barely see it afterwards. But in some cases, it's still visible afterwards. But it because it's got bleach in it, it's acting as a bleaching agent as well. And then. And there's a crack there. I wonder if that's something to do with the drill. But anyway, that's the plaster crack. It's going to be fairly superficial. So there's damp on this wall. That should be this. So with this one, where it's below 300 is generally dry, but see that's showing 999 from there. What's on the other side of this? Is it another building? Is it external? It's external, because
that's the boundary wall between me and my neighbour, and here there is no house. So that's their garden.
Do you know your neighbours? Can I knock on their wall and their door even?
We can try. I don't know them, but yeah, I'm happy.
So looking on the other side, there's a render crack. Couldn't account for, you got a crack on the outside, but that couldn't account for all the damp. So what can happen is that you can get a bit of moisture in there through the crack. It needs to be filled, and that can cause heat loss, but I'm not seeing it penetrating the whole way through. If it were penetrating the whole way through, you'd see a brown stain, and I'm not seeing that, because as it goes through brick, it brings the pigmentation from the brick. But I'm also seeing that there's something growing up there, so I'll have a look from above. And just to understand that.
That might be in a pot. That might be in a pot.
Okay, well in this case it's not going to be a big problem. It looks okay around here. Otherwise, yes, yeah. And it'll only get worse. You can see somebody has tried to fill it in the past. So unfortunately, once so these cracks come from expansion, contraction, and once they've cracked, it'll be ongoing. So you can only really fill it and just look after it every few years. You can actually, the good thing is that you can just put a phone around the side of the wall and just have a look every so often, see how it's doing, once a year or something. I mean, probably ask the neighbours first, but know what I mean. But yeah, very simple. I'm putting this on film so that you can see it afterwards. On the ivy side, generally ivy, it can damage walls. It was too far away to cause any damage from there, but it's also a sign that there's moisture there. but I'm seeing plant growth down there. This has a risk, and I think really what you need to do is have what are called coping stones over the first section, or you can have lots of different things. By the way, you've got hygroscopic salts on your wall there. These sort of darkish brownish colour. Those on the chimney breast.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to information about hygroscopic salts. It may show up. You've got the whole building, presumably.
So I'm sort of that side,
Yeah.
those windows and that chimney breast is me.
Up to the top.
Yeah.
Lovely. Really, really wonderful. So you've got a flat roof there with a terrace, and that's obviously going to be a risk, but I'm not seeing a sign that water's penetrating through, but just be aware that it is a risk, and it looks like you've got bitumen felt, or you might have lead flashing there. You've got lead flashing there, but then bitumen felt on top of it. Just be aware of that.
And that's the skylight that goes downstairs.
Oh yeah, nice, yeah. Okay, so I'll have a look from above. So this shows the area of heat loss, and you're obviously getting heat loss there and there.
Is that normal, or is that telling us something?
That tells me where you're getting the heat loss, and actually it's not where the mould is. Now, the reason that is that this is brown spot mould, and brown spot mould, most mould, most of the mould you see is black spot mould, and up there you've got it, and it's that is growing exactly where you've got the heat loss, whereas the brown spot mould needs a really consistent level of relative humidity. So black spot mould will grow when it's above 85% or more. Brown, it's between about 80% and 85%. If it goes above that, it doesn't like it. It's very fussy mould. Anyway, it's an explanation for why you're getting it. But with every mould, it's the spores are omnipresent, so they're everywhere in the world, looking for somewhere ideal to grow, to germinate. And they've chosen your property.
I'm actually quite lucky.
You were lucky. Well, once you've got them, you just have to use anti-mould sprays or bleach. HG is the one I tend to recommend, but you know, there are plenty of them out there. So the spores are omnipresent, looking for the ideal place to grow. Once they've started to germinate, you will have a much higher concentration of spores, and it will increase the rapidity of the frequency of germination. So you just need to be on top of it, basically. That's the message. But it'll be very easy for you to deal with this. And I would use anti-mold spray is the best one. So bleach is the active ingredient. You can use bleach, but the good thing about anti-mold spray is it sticks to the wall for longer than bleach would do. So.
And then once you've used the spray, do you use any kind of special paint to deter it?
No, you'll find actually, so I post all my surveys online. You'll see one where I went to yesterday where they had used, it was actually the last one I did yesterday afternoon. They'd used an anti-mould paint, and mould had grown back. The reason why is anti-mould paints is trying to reduce the ability for the organic matter to land on the surface. But all mould needs is organic matter to eat, so dust and you know all of those things, and oxygen, water, and humidity, and that's all it needs. So if you're providing it the right ingredients for life. So that would be standard condensation. The reason you're getting it behind the sofa is that vapour moves through diffusion like smoke, so it will go everywhere, whereas heat in the normal residential context moves through air currents, and so the sofa is acting as a insulator. It's not getting the heat in behind the sofa, but it's getting the humid air, so it has high surface relative humidity. And you're getting condensation up there, and obviously mould as well, and that's because you're getting the heat loss. You get very little insulation because the glass is creating heat loss.
Yeah. So
it's actually going to be very easy for you to solve these various things. You've got a bit of blue stain in service. That's this sort of discoloration here.
Yeah.
This is a solid floor, and the timber is in contact with water. It's just it's causing discoloration. It is a rot. It's a white rot, but it's not structural, so you don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
You know, it's just what it is. It's a feature.
Yeah. I like that. It's a feature. This rot is a feature.
Well, woodworm is a feature as well of some properties.
Brilliant.
Utility room is here, and you're getting classic condensation there. It's brown because of the metal from the plasterer's beading, and it's rust rather than penetrating damp, and there's lots of mould up there. And the thing about washer dryers is you have to halve the load in order to use the dry facility, and so most people don't bother, and as a consequence people are drying their clothes without using any form of ventilation or dehumidification. Very simple solution is to use a dehumidifier.
Okay.
And I'm going to recommend you run
Okay.
one 24/7, including when you're away, and get a 20 litre plus dehumidifier.
Okay.
Adults produce 2 litres of water per day, about 1/4 of a litre from cooking, but that changes a lot with different cooking styles.
Yeah.
So pasta will produce a huge amount of water.
Yeah.
You can reduce it by about 80% by turning the flame down so that you're just simmering and putting the top on the pots, and that will make a huge difference.
Okay.
Obviously the extractor fan makes a big difference, but this isn't ducted out, and your
you know
open
what? I'm
plan.
not sure how much this works. So this is
So there's no ducting out, so therefore the fan isn't going out. So sad feature of building regs in this country, as highlighted by Grenfell Towers, that no one ever checks the building regs, but since 2012 it was a requirement to have an ducting from the kitchen extractor fan to the outside. But since no one ever checks, builders...
People don't do it.
Yeah, you pay a builder or kitchen fitter to put it in. You expect it to be done properly, but it will take them half a day to do it properly. But you know, that's extra time for them and lower profit, so people don't do it. No one ever checks. So it's a building regulation requirement to have an externally ducted kitchen extractor fan, but a lot of people don't use them even when they've got them because they're relatively noisy, and we all like to sort of chat and spend time in the kitchen together. So it's really important to choose one that is a low noise, is quiet, and don't have one that's in the side of the separate from the hood. It should just be directed over the hood. Okay. Make sure it's quiet, and it's better to have a quiet one that's going in the background that you're actually using than having a noisy one that you never use, basically.
Okay.
So the aim is to drop the dew point, which is shown here, down to the outside temperature. And the outside temperature at the moment is probably about 2 or 3 degrees centigrade. And how do you do that? Well, by ventilation or dehumidification. So ventilation, every bit of vapour that you blow out is replaced by vapour from the outside. And when it's cold outside, the dew point of the vapour outside will always be below the outside temperature. So if you had all the windows open, do the sort of German purge system, you'll always have a low dew point that's below the outside temperature. But that's a very energy inefficient way of doing it. A very energy efficient way of doing it is to target the source of the vapour, so cooking, drying, washing, or baths, showers, and then use a dehumidifier for all the general vapour. And the benefit of a dehumidifier is all the energy comes out as heat. You get a 50% bonus from entropy, and you get and when the humidity in the air is lower, you'll feel warmer in a cold environment than an example of when it's a humid type environment. So you can turn down your heat and feel just as comfortable. So a lot of people will find when they go from single glazed drafty windows to double glazed windows, they'll find the humidity goes up quite a lot and they start to get mould and condensation after that.
Yeah.
That's because the draft is actually acting as a ventilator. But I believe in targeted ventilation, so targeted on all the sources of vapour and then using the dehumidifier, and then you won't have a problem.
Yeah.
But actually, funnily enough, a single glazed window with condensation is acting like a dehumidifier.
Right, because
So-
I get that. I have that, you know, where
Yeah.
it's single glaze, and actually there's secondary glazing, but the condensation is, I think,
Within the window,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's because the vapour's getting through by diffusion.
Yeah.
You'll probably find you're getting quite a lot of mould within the secondary glazing.
There isn't at the moment, but I mean, I see the point. And there is some mould on the, I'll show you on the bathroom window, and that's single. But
Let's have a look.
Yeah.
Some of the extractor fan manufacturers choose to have really slow fans to keep them as quiet as possible. Oh look, there's nothing coming out of that. It's barely an excuse. It's not even turning around.
Oh, so it's not actually working.
So obviously classic condensation. Oh yeah, a bit of mould there. So this has got backflow shutters. Actually, to be fair, it does open relatively easily, but it's closed behind it. Oh, I can't even really. It's blocked up outside. You can see if you can see on this. No. Anyway, immediately outside, there's the window, and it's brick. It's going nowhere. Well, that may be your root cause as well as the lack of kitchen extractor fan. It's entirely pointless. It's another example of builder fraud. I'm going to do something on builder fraud because, yeah, anyway, it should be in line with the top of the window. You probably about, it'll take somebody about half an hour to do it properly. You need a diamond drill, so I wouldn't necessarily do it yourself, but and just take this off. But the point is that somebody has gone to the effort to drill part way through this wall and not drill the whole way through. So somebody's committed fraud of some sort, but obviously not on yourself, on your predecessor, but and you're suffering the consequences of it. A nice bit of condensation there. With the timber, you've got early signs of or at least you've got a risk of window rot.
Yeah.
All you need to do is strip this back and paint it. And
Okay, so it's not. I mean, that sounds.
it actually looks a hell of a lot worse than it is.
Yeah.
My finger isn't going deep into it, so.
Yeah. No, I'm going to get those.
You'll find that you're getting it on the inside as well because of the condensation. Yeah. So yeah, actually it looks worse than it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just an annual maintenance thing.
Yeah.
With this, there's a possibility for some of the moisture to soak through, but it's actually a long way down, so it's unlikely to be affecting the room downstairs, but it's rendered on both sides, so it's not going to evaporate out very easily. You can put on a type of paint that reduces or makes bricks less permeable. I'll put that in, or you can put coping stones on, which are just stones that go over the top. I was telling you about that.
Yeah.
I would put coping stones on that.
Yeah. So just on that top brick bit.
On On the
you
top.
know, like, yes,
Yeah.
across the top of it.
Or in this case, I wouldn't particularly worry about it because I can't see any signs of penetrating damp.
Yeah.
But what can happen is moisture in here can then soak into here and then can cause decay, blistering of the render behind. So it can sort of exacerbate a problem. These might be just decorative. They could be just sitting on top of an impermeable layer.
Okay.
It's difficult to know
Yeah.
without seeing
Yeah.
the design.
Yeah.
This darker zone is a sign of hygroscopic salts in the past. It comes from coal mainly, burning of coal. They cause deliquescence. This is a form of condensation, but normal levels of relative humidity. A little bit like saline solution, how it has a specific relative humidity of 75%. Calcium nitrate has a specific relative humidity of about 50% at normal temperature, room temperature 20 degrees. And the reason it's dark like that, you can see it on the outside of Downing Street, 10 Downing Street, is because it's trapped the soot from historic soot, you know, before the Clean Air Act. And you may have it on the inside. I'll have a look, but not necessarily. Got a crack there as well. They just, all the cracks just need to be filled.
Yeah, okay.
They're probably not penetrating the whole way through, but what will happen is that it will draw in moisture like a capillary, and it will cause the outside of the brick to become damp, and a damp brick is a poor insulator and it loses heat, so it increases the risk of condensation and mould. So it's Dr. Meter. Actually, sometimes you find it hard to get hold of them, but there are other brands. But the important thing is that it starts on drywall, which is fine for where you've got, if it's got a, none of these, if any of the walls are dry lined, which means it's plasterboard.
Yeah, it might be maybe that one, to that downstairs toilet.
There you go. So that's suitable for dry lining. It's when it's got a hollow sound. Otherwise you have to put it down and then it's masonry. And what this is doing is it's measuring, it's sending in radio waves into the wall and at a specific frequency, and it bounces back for water, but it can't differentiate between water and other solid matters, but in a normal wall you don't get metal and so on. So it's a really good way of finding out whether the wall's drying out.
And you said if it's above, was it 30?
No, so the other meter was 300, but
okay.
with this one, what you want to do is go to a dry bit of wall you know is dry and just have a look at the number. Each property is going to be different, but it's showing 54.
Okay.
And so that's where you're heading towards.
So that's normal, fine.
What I find is it will go to 99 when it's really damp, or 100% when it's damp. Otherwise it's drying. It's a sort of sign of saturation. I wouldn't get too focused on the number. I would focus on the relative number. So that's to say that you want to be seeing it come down. And it will take 6 to 9 months for a wall to dry out fully. Yeah, so just be aware of that, particularly if there's lots of wall coverings slow down the process of drying. You can use a fan to increase it and obviously dehumidifier and some heat. So you've got a few risks. Oh, that's rotten there. But all you need to do is to fill it. Use what's called 2-pack. You want to take away the loose timber and then fill it with 2-pack. You want to take away the loose paint and paint it up, and any cracks and gaps, but it looks actually fine. You might, I mean, if there's if there's vegetation, it means there's water, so it could be worth filling that. There's good reason to put a bit of render on the corner there, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. Do you see how this pipe's going out? Well, that pipe is going to get really cold, and so you're going to get a lot of cold around the inside. And if we look inside, well, immediately inside from that pipe, it's where all the dampness is. So it causes massive heat loss, which causes condensation and mould.
Yeah. And then
Well, that's because of the lack of heat. I mean, even though I'm a big believer in reducing vapour as your primary focus, because that's the primary cause, there's a lot to be said for using targeted insulation.
Okay.
You can use thermal lining paper, and I'll show you some examples of insulation.
Okay.
But yeah, and also it's not a bad thing to use anti-mold paint as well. It just gives you a couple of degrees of freedom.
Okay. Yeah.
To you afterwards anyway, but the 5 things you want to focus on is, well, using the data loggers to make sure that you're keeping the internal vapor levels as measured in temperature by dew point below the outside temperature. Number 1, targeted ventilation. So kitchen, ideally, but there's an alternative, bathroom ideally, and or use a dehumidifier.
Yeah.
Then I would use an anti-mold spray such as HG, but there are plenty of alternatives, or bleach.
Yeah.
So you're getting rid of it and try and hunt it down and get rid of all of it. And in an area that's susceptible, it's worth using an anti-mold paint. They only add like a two degrees of freedom, but you know, it's all going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's it really.
Yeah.
You can think of insulation, but that's an additional thing to consider. If you're putting a painting up there, you can put a bit of insulation behind the painting as an example.
Okay. Yeah.
So very typical issue with a mould in a property. Client thought it was rising damp. Surveyor said it was rising damp when she bought it, but actually it certainly wasn't. It wasn't in an area of the UK at risk of rising damp, and it's very simple to demonstrate if there is groundwater, which is the root cause of rising damp. So very simple, it's a ventilation problem. The bathroom extractor fan wasn't working, the kitchen extractor fan isn't in place, and needs a dehumidifier as well. Okay, please leave comments, and I'll see you at the next video. Thank you.